Welcome to another edition of the Lab 207 webcast. My name is Mr. Kite, and I'll be hanging out with you today as we continue on in our forever long series about the living world. Really, we got about 3 or 4 more videos, then we are done with this and off to something completely different. Topic for the day is going to be the nervous system. Like always, let me get you your objectives and then we'll get on into it. So, by the end of this video, 2 simple things that you need to know. First one, understand major progressions in the development of the nervous system, and describe the major components of the central and peripheral nervous system. Today is all about nervous system nuts and bolts, so nothing real complex, just kind of some information to remember. If we're talking about the nervous system, we want to start out by talking about the, evolutionary progression of the development of the nervous system. We're just going to start right over here with our cnidarians. Cnidarians show the simplest of nervous systems. All they have is a nerve net, which is basically a network of nerves. There's no bunching of nerves, just single nerve lines that spread throughout the whole organism. And this allows them to respond to simple stimuli. They can't really move in any coordinated, directional, thoughtful manner. They just simply respond. Next up, a little more complex, is you take the nerves and you start bundling them together in an organized way, which we see in the echinoderms. So echinoderms have got a central nerve ring, and then they've got a major nerve that branches out into each arm, and then off of each of those nerves there are smaller nerves. So this is where we start to see the first groupings of nerves. We move on to the important development in the nervous system, and that is the bundling of nerves into ganglia. Ganglia is just a big grouping of nerves that usually have some sort of sensory or integrative function. So with our flatworms, we see the first brain in that we have got lumping together of nerves into ganglia right here at the front. And then they've got transverse nerves, which are basically a big nerve that would be kind of analogous to our spinal cord, with nerves that branch off. Now, move on over to our cephalopods, and we start seeing several ganglia and a more developed brain. These cephalopods have got really big eyes, pretty complex behaviors, so they've got a much more complex nervous system than, obviously, a flatworm. Moving on, earthworm, they show several ganglia throughout their body, and then we get to the vertebrate system, which consists of a very large brain, which obviously is like the biggest ganglia of nerves ever, connected to the spinal cord, and then off of that a ton of peripheral nerves, which we're going to talk about in a second. So just kind of look back through that and recognize some of the major steps that took us from nerve nets all the way up to the highly developed vertebrate nervous system. So speaking of that vertebrate nervous system, I want to just go through kind of nuts and bolts, major parts of it. Our nervous system is broken up into several pieces. The first big division is between the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system has 2 components. It's got the brain and the spinal cord. The brain is integration central, so all information is going to come in, well, not all, most information is going to come in through the spinal cord. Spinal cord will conduct that information up to the brain will process it, it will deal with it, and then it will send the information back out, usually through the spinal cord. But the brain is the major integration system, and it's obviously what makes us humans and makes vertebrates more complex than all other organisms. Now, attached to that big old brain is the spinal cord. Spinal cord is the great relay line. So all sensory information, certainly from the neck down, that needs to get to the brain has to go through the spinal cord first. And also any information transmitted from the brain to the rest of the body goes out through the spinal cord. Another function the spinal cord has is reflexes. So if the body, say, needs to move your hand away from something hot, it doesn't have time to send the signal all the way up to the brain, have the brain process, oh, this is hot, it's bad, it's burning you, move your hand. So it's much simpler for the spinal cord just to kind of shortcut that circuit and move the hand right off the burner if you were touching a stove. And if you kind of think about this, you'll notice that when you've touched something hot, your hand moves back away from the source of heat before you actually feel the pain or the heat. So that would be reflexes, and that is just kind of stopping the information in the spinal cord, saying, brain, you don't need to get involved with this, I got it, I'll keep you safe. Now, attached to the central nervous system, or nurturing the central nervous system, is cerebrospinal fluid. The brain and spinal cord aren't actually bathed in blood, but obviously they need nutrients, they need oxygen, they need to get rid of waste. So there's some structures in the brain and the spinal cord that actually filter blood. They pull out fluids, plasma, nutrients, gases, and they produce this cerebrospinal fluid that's got everything in it that the brain and the spinal cord need. In the brain, there are spaces called ventricles. Those are the places where the cerebrospinal fluid is actually made, and then that fluid is circulated down and around and through the spinal cord and up through the brain, and it basically takes care of all of the brain's circulatory needs, whether it means bringing in sugar for the brain to use to nurture itself, or if it means getting rid of waste or bringing in oxygen or whatever else. The cerebrospinal fluid is kind of a separate circulatory system within our circulatory system, and it is responsible for taking care of just the brain and the spinal cord. Now, our brain and spinal cord are made up of two different types of matter, if you will. There's gray matter and there's white matter. The gray matter, as far as what it is made of, it's made of cell bodies, dendrites, and unmyelinated axons. The gray matter is the stuff that is responsible for receiving and processing a lot of information. They talk about you got a lot of gray matter if you're really smart. That's because this is the processing center. And if you think about what we talked about a ways ago with neurons, this will make sense because we talked about the cell body of that neuron being the place that kind of decides how the signal that's going to be sent out down the axon is going to go. So big lumps of these cell bodies together form the gray matter, and that is kind of the integrator of information. And that is kind of contrasted against white matter. And white matter is just made up of myelinated axons, and it's the sender of signals. This right here is actually a picture of white matter pathways within the brain. And the big thing about white matter is it takes all of those signals that have been processed in the gray matter and sends them out. And it also brings in signals from the, surrounding nerves. The white matter helps out with some processing and kind of integration of information. So gray matter receives things and does a lot of the processing. White matter kind of sends out signals. And just know that the brain and the spinal cord are made up of both gray matter and white matter in distinctive areas. You don't have to know where the gray matter and the white matter is, just kind of know that they're both present in the brain and the spinal cord. Now we also have got the peripheral nervous system, and this is basically the rest of our nervous system. Transmits information to and from the central nervous system, and it's responsible for regulating movement and homeostasis. So we were just talking about the central nervous system, which would consist of the brain right here and the spinal cord. Everything that is not brain or spinal cord is peripheral nervous system. So all those other branches you see branching off to the sides are what is known as the peripheral nervous system. And that peripheral nervous system can be broken down into two categories, and then one of those will be further broken down. So first major division of the peripheral nervous system is between the motor system and the autonomic system. Easiest way to keep this separated is for the motor system, kind of have the saying in your head, I think, therefore I move. The motor system is responsible for all of your thoughtful muscular movement. So as you are thinking about speaking, your brain is telling the muscles around your mouth and face to move. As you move your arm or your leg or whatever, that would be your motor system working. The autonomic system is responsible for all of those processes in your body that happen automatically without you thinking about it. So motor system, you think about it to make it happen. Autonomic happens without your thought process. And last division, last slide for the day, our autonomic nervous system is broken down into 3 divisions, and each division obviously has a different function. So the divisions are the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric. For the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, that is your fight or flight response. So the sympathetic division is basically going to heighten your senses. It's going to increase your heart rate. It's going to reduce digestion. It's going to increase the release of glucose into your bloodstream. It's going to prepare your body to do battle or run away. One of the two. It heightens your senses. On the opposite end of this, you've got the parasympathetic system, which you can remember as the rest and digest system. Parasympathetic lowers blood pressure, lowers heart rate, lowers breathing rate, increases digestive rate, and basically gives your body time to rest. So sympathetic is used when you got a lion chasing you. Parasympathetic is used after Thanksgiving dinner and you're laying on the couch. Last one is the enteric system, and the enteric system is the system that is specifically responsible for digestion. So it takes care of peristalsis, which is the muscular contractions that move food up and down your esophagus. It takes care of the movement of food and stuff around in your belly, the movement of digested material through your intestines. All of that happens through the enteric system. So that's it. It's nuts and bolts of the nervous system. I hope this little tutorial was helpful for you. My name is Mr. Kite. This has been the Lab 207 webcast. Hopefully we'll see you again.